Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana. And we're here today with special guest, Alisha Fernandez Miranda. And she's here to share with us her new memoir, My What If Year. So Alisha serves as a chair and former CEO of IG Advisors, an award-winning social impact intelligence agency that consults with the world's largest nonprofits, foundations, and corporations on their philanthropy and social initiatives. Alisha is a graduate from Harvard University and the London School of Economics. Her writings have appeared in Vogue, Business Insider, Romper, and Huffington Post. And her new book, My What If Year, is the first release from Zippy Books. So welcome to the show, Alisha Fernandez Miranda.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh my goodness, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about your new book. So oh my goodness, what a journey you had.
Oh gosh, I really kind of pinpoint the start back in early 2019. I was living in London. I was CEO of my own consulting business in the philanthropy and kind of social impact space. Happily married, 2 lovely children, a very Instagrammable French bulldog. And I'd sort of done all the things that were on my list to do. And I was getting ready to turn 40. And I just felt this sort of like gaping hole of unhappiness, and I could not figure out why. And I was just guilty, feeling very guilty that I sort of had this, I had everything and I should have been appreciating it. And I was just feeling really kind of depressed and at a point of crisis. And I had this very small idea that ended up evolving into a bigger idea, which was just thinking back and reflecting on all the paths that I had not taken when I was younger. So the jobs I thought I might do, the things I had always loved and then dropped because, by choice or chance, they became things that I didn't have time for or didn't pay attention to or spend energy on. And I thought, what if I decide to go back and try out these things that I, never got a chance to do. And that idea, as it kind of evolved, sort of formed in my head as, all right, I'm going to go do these short, unpaid internships at the jobs I always wanted to do when I was a kid. And I'm going to take some time and do them. And then I'm going to come back. I'll be all refreshed and like happy to go on with the script just as it had always been written, which is not what ended up happening. Not the least of reason, which was because this all happened in early 2020. So lining that up with your calendar, kind of how all of our year unfolded in 2020. But I ended up doing 4 internships in 4 very different industries: musical theater, contemporary art, fitness, and hotels, hospitality, and kind of restaurant business. And it completely changed my life. And I wrote a book about it.
And here we are today.
Very unrecognizable. My life looks very, very different than it did when I was having this idea back in 2019, but could not be sort of happier and more delighted with how things have turned out on this very winding road.
So why do you think you have this level of happiness? What has brought that to you?
I was walking with my husband today, this morning, and I was saying to him, I said, I can't remember the last time I felt so energized about my work and my professional life. And it was really, when I was doing the internships, I was so excited about them. But, before that, it had been so long. And I think I had gotten really comfortable. I think I had sort of settled in to things being the way they were, to things, this kind of idea that things were always going to be the same way. And I think I had really stopped pushing myself. I had stopped learning. I had stopped challenging myself. I was very content to just do things that I knew how to do and that I had done before. And there can be a lot of joy in that. And frankly, when my twins were little, that was exactly what I needed. I needed something that I could do without having to think too much about it or stretch myself, because I was also trying to figure out how to be a mom and work as well. But as my kids got a bit older, that didn't feel anymore like it fit. And so I think that now pretty much everything I do scares me just a little bit. And I think that's a very good place for me to be.
Well, I really like how you start your book in many ways with your discussion with your friends. You're out having a fun time, having mom's night out. And Laura asks you a question that it seems like that becomes a pivotal moment for you.
it was such, it's one of those like scenes that plays in my head. And I think when you go through kind of like a big transition or a change period in your life, often things happen gradually. But that moment with my two best friends drinking rose lychee martinis away from our kids, it was a reminder of kind of what we had all been like when we first met when we were 18, 19, 20, and the world was full of possibilities and everything was sort of this blank page to write on. And then, life changes over time. We grow and develop. We had all been very fortunate in our own ways, but having someone that knew me so well asking me this question of what would I do if I could do anything? What is stopping me from not doing the things that I think I want to do? It really hit me in a different way. And I think that's kind of the amazing thing about old friends and good friendships, isn't it? Is that these are people who have known you for a long time and they can kind of see through who you are now to who you were and always were, and maybe push you in places where you don't feel always like you want to be pushed. But I'm very glad they did.
Does Laura know the impact that she's made on you?
She does. Laura was an early reader of my book. And she read a very first draft. She's been so encouraging through the process. And actually, it was Laura's dad who helped me get my first kind of internship. So shadowing these two productions in New York, a Broadway show and an off-Broadway show that were about to open right as COVID was taking hold. And so, yeah, Laura has changed my life in many ways. In college, Laura actually was the person who had a look at my credit card bill and said, "You have got to get rid of this credit card. It has a 78% interest rate." And I was like, "Laura, but it's leopard print and it matches my purse." And she was like, "Oh my God, you have so much to learn." Laura has been teaching me a lot since we were 18, and I am extremely grateful for her friendship.
She sounds like a very good friend, and she's also helping to teach a little bit here and there.
Definitely keeping an eye out for me for sure.
Well, and let's talk about your first internship, with her, her dad kind of set you up. How did that come to be?
So, even though I had what I thought was like, a very full resume, I had worked pretty consistently since I graduated college, had a master's degree, I had done a lot of things, and I started sending out my resume and a cover letter to pretty much anybody I could think of that would maybe have an internship opportunity. And I was very kind of clear in my opening note. I was like, I don't expect to get paid. I'm going on this personal journey. At the time, writing a book was like a fantasy idea. It wasn't even something I was really taking seriously. But, I went so wide with my job hunt, and I came up short again and again and again. Most people did not write me back. It was very, very difficult, surprisingly difficult to get a job as an intern. And so, really where I ended up finding that these opportunities, and particularly starting with Laura, was with friends and family friends and people who knew me and trusted me, knew I was going to put the effort in and try to do a good job and take it seriously. And so Laura's dad, John, who's an award-winning writer, he's written musicals, he's written for Sesame Street. He's just an incredible creative. He kind of wrote me back and said, "Well, if you're looking to do this, I might know a few people. And, this is the time I think you should go." And he helped me kind of craft my pitch to them. And he just made these introductions. And it was like the most exciting thing in the world to get an email in my inbox from John Doyle or James Lapine, these people, directors on Broadway whose names I had idolized, saying, "Oh, sure, you're welcome to come and observe our production and, maybe be helpful if you want." It was like a dream come true.
It sounds like so much fun.
It was so much fun. It was so much fun that I was really ignoring the fact that, this was early March 2020. So things were really starting to heat up. Things in the UK were getting, increasingly more challenging. All over Europe, schools had already closed. You all remember those early days of COVID when restrictions were coming in at different times at different places. And honestly, I was just having the most extraordinary experience that I was in complete denial that anything was going to happen. I was like, this is all going to blow over. And I kept going that way until it didn't.
I think many of us were wishing for that to happen too.
Totally.
I can kind of see that as a wish list for many of us. With this great change that you made, how were you able to juggle your family life with your new life?
So I have an incredibly supportive husband who was really gung-ho about this whole journey. And, without him, there's absolutely no way that I would have been able to to do anything. I mean, he was going to stay with the kids while I was in New York. He did stay with the kids while I was gone for 2 weeks. There was a lot of shuttling back and forth and really picking up the slack where I wasn't able to kind of do all the day-to-day stuff that normally had been most of my responsibility. So that was like a huge helping hand in terms of being able to do this. Now it's funny. I think I have a lot of control over my days. I do a lot of different projects for a lot of different people. I do writing, which is a job that you can kind of make time for and do around other things that have to be scheduled. And my kids are 11 now, so they're in school all day. And then I basically have to beg them to hang out with me after school and not be too cool to not want to spend time with me. But, if it sounds easy, it's not. I think I felt a lot of guilt at different parts of the journey. I felt, like I had, left my kids, like I should be there with them. There's a scene in the first section when I'm in New York where my daughter was having a really tricky time with a good friend of hers. Of course, there's all this stress that kids are hearing around this pandemic without any knowledge, back in early March 2020. And, I wasn't there for her. And I wasn't there because I was kind of pursuing this personal project, this dream that I had. And that was hard because, since I had become a mom, most of my energy had been spent trying to focus on my kids and making sure they were happy, they were able to pursue their dreams, and they were able to have everything they want. So it's a very tricky balance. I definitely do not get it right, not even close to 100% of the time. But I think my kids also, I like that they can see me doing things that I'm passionate about. I like that they can see me trying things that I'm not good at and maybe not doing them so well. And I'm hoping that that lesson is going to stick and be with them when they grow.
For our listeners that are listening to this story and how your life has been, I mean, what kind of advice would you give them, or what kind of questions should they be asking themselves?
I really love that question because I think, going and doing unpaid internships is certainly not even desirable for everybody. And there was a lot of privilege that I had and have that enabled me to do that. A supportive partner, a business that I had started and was running and therefore could kind of manage my schedule around that to take these internships. I had a lot supporting me. But I think that the emotional barriers that were in place for me, are things that a lot of people really feel. So this idea that, maybe I can't do this. There's something I'm bad at, or I could never do it. Being afraid to do something new because you're worried of failure, because you're worried about the risk. I think everybody can and should be questioning that little voice. If something is ever saying, oh, I couldn't possibly do that, I think it is important to ask yourself, why? Why couldn't you do that? Is it a legitimate, practical reason, or is it an emotional reason? And if it's an emotional reason, is that something maybe you should be doing and pushing yourself to do? And I also think that there are opportunities to learn, to grow, to rekindle your passion for something especially as you get older, that don't necessarily involve leaving your job and going to do internships. If you have always loved painting and maybe you stopped painting because you got busy, why not take a class? Why not buy yourself a canvas and a set of paints and start doing that again? I started to realize through this process, there were so many things that I loved doing that I had just removed from my life because I wasn't making time for them. And I brought them back in, and that has brought me so much joy, everyday joy and simple joy that has been so meaningful to me. And so I think really, those are the two things I would say. Ask yourself the hard questions and make sure that you find time to chase the things you're passionate about and joyful about, and, make them a part of your life again, especially if you've maybe stepped away from them.
Such great advice. I love that. And how do you think your children look at being able to ask themselves these questions about their own dreams? I'm sure they're learning quite a bit about that.
I think, sometimes my kids will say, because they are twins, they're 11 now. And so I'll often, like once every 2 weeks, it's like, well, I've changed my mind about what I want to be when I grow up. Now I want to be a professional YouTuber or a soccer player. I think I want to win 5 World Cups more than Messi. It really, every single week, it's something new. And the thing that I say to them and that I try to live by example is I say, you don't have to just think you're going to be one thing, right? When you go into the working world, you need to study hard, you need to build up your skills, and you need to do something that you care about. And then who's to say that that's just your first career, or maybe you'll do more than one career? Our working lives are getting longer and longer. And I think this idea that you kind of leave college and you do the same job till you retire is, getting less frequent. I certainly think for my kids' generation, that's going to be, certainly far from the norm to do something like that. And I think it's good that we think of our jobs in these phases. So I really encourage my kids to think about learning different things, trying things that they may not think they're good at, which they don't always love doing. And then also to just, realize that when they think about their own future and their professional life, that it doesn't have to be, I'm going to go do this one job. I think that there can be lots of phases and stages to our careers, and I'm trying to encourage them to do that. And I think they're getting the message.
Yeah, I think that's they get so much I think advice in advance, and it's such great advice because most of us do have several careers within our lifetime.
Yeah, even if you don't plan it that way, sometimes that's just how it works out.
Yes. And so it's nice to be able to plan it and do what you really like.
Exactly. And to know that kind of you have to be adaptable, you have to be flexible and resilient, and that, there's only so much about your professional path that you can control. But one of the biggest skills I try to teach my kids, the only successfully part of the time, I would say, is that you really have to be resilient. Like if there's just one thing I want them to be able to do, it's to be able to know that they are going to be able to pick themselves up and move on whatever the world throws at them, because they're living in a very different time than what I grew up in. And I think that's the thing that's going to carry them through.
So we all know what happened to theater during the beginning of the lockdown. What did you do during the lockdown then?
I ate so many baked goods. Truly, I ate everything that I could bake. That was my emotional eating, was like my main stress response for the first part of lockdown. I took a couple weeks, I think, like everybody else, in shock, trying to manage homeschooling my children, which I was not a natural at or anything close to it. Dealing with the fallout for my business and making sure that my staff were able to work, and that, we could still everybody could still be paid, and feeling very responsible for those people that were working for me. Just kind of those first few weeks really feeling very, very low and scared and not knowing what was going to happen. And also really selfishly depressed that maybe this internship project, it was done. Like I did 2.5 weeks. And then I had this incredibly magical time, and that was it. It was over. And who knew what was going to happen? I had a second internship lined up at Christie's, the auction house in the post-war and contemporary team. And I had been so excited about that. It was supposed to happen in the spring. And I think, you said before, Marianne, about wishful thinking. I absolutely was wishing that, this was going to be a month. Maybe lockdown would be 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and then everything would go back to normal and we would all be fine. And I got this email from the lovely young woman who was going to be my boss. And she said, look, no one's going back into the office anytime soon. I'm afraid we have to indefinitely postpone your work experience. I have no idea what was going to happen. So amidst lockdown and trying to manage my businesses and trying to, keep my mental health sane and take care of myself and my family, I just decided, I was like, I got to keep going with this project. This is what's going to keep me sane. And so I reached out to a very good friend of mine who had started her own kind of dance and fitness company. It was a very retro vibe. It's called Retro Glow Studios in London. And I said, do you need help? Can I be your virtual intern for a few weeks? I need something to keep this project moving. And she was game for it. She said, yeah, I've started doing Instagram lives. I am going to transition to virtual fitness. I could really use some help. She didn't have any staff working for her at the time. She said, come and help me and do this for her. So that is also how I spent my first lockdown, as a virtual fitness intern. I tried out virtual fitness classes from all over the world, recorded them in a spreadsheet. I helped her with her social media and set up her business practices. And that really kept me going through the end of the first UK lockdown.
So approaching these different jobs as an intern, what were some of the pluses with that?
I mean, I think after having been in charge for a long time, and feeling responsible for everyone and everything as CEO and running my own company. A major plus for me was not being in charge of anything. So for this brief period of time, all of a sudden there were, I was not the most knowledgeable person in the room. I wasn't the most senior person. I wasn't the one that was supposed to be taking care of everything. And to kind of have that responsibility lifted off my shoulders for a little while felt amazing in a way that I could not have possibly expected. Being an intern, whether you're 16 or 25 or 65 or whenever you do it, the premise of being an intern is sort of you do anything and everything, but in exchange, you get to see anything and everything. And so these fields that I had always been so fascinated by, that I had loved from afar, that I had maybe seen as an audience member or a guest, I was all of a sudden getting to see behind the scenes. And as an intern, I got to see everything. I got to see really how things worked. I got to see what different people did all day. And that was just really an extraordinary experience because I think it's kind of, one of the few ways that you get to really see a job in an industry for all of the different pieces that it contains is by coming in at this very entry level and, doing everything and seeing everything and paying attention and learning and taking notes. I loved the learning aspect of it. I learned so much. I learned every day. And then there were bonuses, of course, for each internship. When I was on Broadway and off Broadway, I was sitting in on rehearsals every day. When I was working for Retro Glow, I was doing all of these exercise classes, which were so much fun and weird and just, getting me moving and making me feel better. When I worked at the hotel in Scotland, I was eating as much food as I could sneak off of the back shelves in the kitchen and take out of the fridge, and it was so good. So there were loads of perks to the jobs. Each one had its own benefits.
It sounds like it. It sounds like it was just such an adventure. And so you are working with this company, and you're doing the fitness intern as a fitness. What ended up making you change and going to Christie's?
So Christie's, unfortunately, was a non-starter, but I knew I wanted to work in the art industry. So in the UK, people didn't really go back into offices for a very, very, very long time after the initial phases of the pandemic. And so as much as I had been desperate to be able to go into the auction house, to go into Christie's, they unfortunately weren't taking any work experience back. But I knew I wanted to work in art. Art was another sort of big wish list area for me. I had minored in art history in college. I call it my sliding doors life. I almost, I chased after a job right after college in art. It didn't work out, and my career went in a different direction, but I had always loved it. So I knew I wanted to do something in art. The fitness internship was great. I learned so much and I loved it, but it was, after doing it, I was pretty sure that I was not going to chase after a career in fitness. There was a lot about it that was, really similar to the job I had been doing. It was running a business, basically, most of it. So I think I realized that I preferred fitness on the other side of the TV or the other side of the instructor. But I had this hankering. I knew I wanted to do this art internship. And so I reached out to kind of my best contact in the art world, an old friend who I had known since my college days, who had run a gallery. And originally I was going to intern with him, and then that didn't work out. And I just said, can you introduce me to anybody and everybody? I'm getting back in the internship game. My Christie's thing didn't work out. I want to go and do something. And he said, well, I'm going to start dealing contemporary art again. I've been taking a little break through the pandemic, but I'm going to start this new business. Why don't you come intern for me? And that was an opportunity I couldn't pass up. So I went and spent a month working for his brand new contemporary art dealership. So buying and selling contemporary painting and sculpture.
Sounds like so much fun being able to do that. And the Christie's people, they missed out, So.
They did. I mean, I really feel for them. I think they had a real, they had a real work experience program where you kind of follow this curriculum, you go on rotation, you get a dress code sent to you, which I was like, oh my God, I don't have any of these clothes. I'm going to need to go shopping immediately. And that would have been a very different experience. But working with Harry, because, he was just starting out, because he just, it was those really exciting early days of the business. I would like go over to his house and there would be a Hockney painting in his living room that he had just gotten in that he was trying to sell. I mean, I got the kind of access, I got the ability to see these pieces of art. I don't think I would have been able to do that at a big place like Christie's where I was just one of many work experience people. So I think maybe it worked out for the best in the end. At least that's the optimistic take on it.
I would say so. That sounds like such a great take. And then, so you're working in art. Then where does your path take you?
So I spent this month with Harry. I was, back in London. My kids had just started school. They were back in in-person school again. This was timeline-wise sort of fall of 2020. And before I had even started working with Harry, I had set up a fourth internship, which was at a hotel and restaurant on the Isle of Skye. So I know you've been there, Marianne, but for anybody who hasn't, it's a very remote northwest corner of Scotland. Beautiful, beautiful, very rural island, a place that my family and I had spent a lot of time and where we had kind of waited out a lot of the pandemic. And so I had lined up this internship already there, thinking that I would go back to Skye. My kids had a break from school coming up, so they were going to come up as well. And I just, I love hotels. I love restaurants. That was like another experience that I really wanted to have. So I did a month with Harry doing contemporary art, and then I got on the train and I came up to the Isle of Skye. And I got to work in this beautiful, beautiful hotel. And they put me on a rotation. So I did a week in the restaurant and kitchen. I did a week in the front of house, which was like checking people in and, serving people in the bar, in the front bar, and kind of doing all those sort of front-facing activities for the guests that were arriving. And then I did a week in the office and my few extra days kind of around here and there in the office. I was like filing and learning about the different aspects of the business and seeing how they kind of dealt with people checking in and out and organizing events and all of the administrative stuff. And that was so much fun. I was very, very bad at it. You'll read it in the book how bad I truly was. I don't have a lot of hand-eye coordination, and there was so much about that job that was just the kind of opposite of anything I had ever been good at. So that was an extremely humbling experience, but I really had a fantastic, fantastic time.
I think one of the high points is when they talk, when it's shared about how your shirt caught on fire.
Oh my God. It was like, I was in physical pain. I had worked like when I was in my 20s, I had worked in a bar, but that was like a very different, I was very different, very young then. I think my knees were in better shape and my feet were in better shape. Restaurant work, hospitality work is so physically exhausting. So I was like in pain all of the time. I would go to the bathroom and lock myself in just to sit down because I just needed to sit sometimes. I'd be so tired and I didn't want anybody to know how tired I was. I nearly set my shirt on fire. I spilled an entire bottle of Coca-Cola on myself once and then just had to finish my shift covered in sticky, wet Coke, but I was wearing black, luckily, so it wasn't very noticeable. It was like one thing after the other. I just could not seem to get it right. And it's funny because I was back there recently as a guest, not as an intern for sure. But they, like many businesses, I think, it's been hard to find staff and restaurant staff and bar staff in particular. So every time I go back, I'm always like, guys, do you want me to come and work another shift? Like, I know what I'm doing. I could just slot right in. And everyone's like, no, that's fine. Don't worry. We really don't need you to come back because nobody wants me to do any of that again. So luckily they were very, very kind about it. They would never say that to my face, but I think everybody's pretty relieved I'm not serving guests there anymore.
That's too hysterical. Oh my goodness. Well, and I know you spend time in Skye quite a bit. So what does that do for you?
It is like a major unplugging experience for me. I think, I grew up in Miami. So when people find out that I'm from Miami and that I spend a lot of my time on the Isle of Skye and I live permanently in Scotland now, they're always like, why would you ever move here? Every taxi driver, I would say, like coming back from the airport or something like that, as soon as they hear my accent and then they realize I live in Edinburgh, they're like so confused. They're like, why do you live in Scotland? But the first time I ever went to the Highlands, we went and stayed in this kind of one of these like vacation cabins you could rent, no Wi-Fi, no phone service, no, you just get dropped off on this island and you stay there for a week. You bring all your own food and you cook everything and you have this like very, unplugged experience. And the first time I did that was when my kids were like 4. And I just it was like waking up from a really, like I had been in kind of like Sleeping Beauty and I was just waking up. It had been so long since I had been unplugged and completely disconnected and gone for walks and looked up at the stars. I mean, my God, I had not looked at the stars and I don't even know how long. And I kind of had my like reconnecting with nature that a lot of people had during COVID if they had the good fortune to be able to be outside. I had that a few years earlier. And so Sky for me just does that. It's like I go over the bridge or I take the ferry over and it's like my body immediately relaxes. The tension in my shoulders release. I can breathe. The air is clearer. My head feels clearer. And it just really helps me like recenter myself. I spend a lot of time outside. I do all this stuff that people, even very good friends, Laura, my very good friend Laura is constantly asking like, what happened to you? Now you're like hiking and I swim all year round in Sky. I swim in December in my wetsuit and I get in the water, even if it's like 35 degrees outside. And, I'm like an outdoorsy person there, but it helps me connect with myself in a way that I think I had lost for a long time. So I love it. I could not be a bigger fan of that very magical, wonderful place. I think everybody should go and visit.
Well, I'd agree with you, although you're much braver than me. I don't think I could do the swimming part right now.
I don't know. You say that, but there's something about it. It's pretty incredible, actually.
I'll have to think about that next time.
I will take you swimming, Marianne, if you come visit. We will go swimming.
We will go swimming. So, Alisha, where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community and learn more about not just this book, but what you're doing?
So I am pretty active on Instagram. My handle is at Alisha F. Miranda. And then I share lots of updates on my website, which is alishafmiranda.com. You can sign up for my newsletter there, and you can see what adventures I'm going on next and all the people I'm still begging to give me internships and find out if any of them say yes.
Well, I can't wait to hear what your next great adventure will be. And, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Such a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I loved it.
Well, thank you, Alisha. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new memoir, My What If Year. My What If Year is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers. And you can also purchase this book from the publisher Zippy Books. If you'd like to connect with Alisha and be part of her community, learn more about her work, her website is alishafmiranda.com. Well, on that note, we're going to pause here for a quick moment, and we'll be right back after this message. I'd like to thank Jason Eastwood at Guitarfulness for sharing his inspiring music and talent with us. His music is known worldwide for cultivating atmospheres of harmony, inner peace, and clarity. Visit Jason's website at guitarfulness.com. Join his newsletter, be part of his community, and download his music. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.